Hello everyone, and welcome to our presentation, Gender and Sexuality Spectrums, What Are They and How Do They Affect Youth Relationships? We are the YALLs, Youth Advocacy and Leadership Learning through Social Support with Safe Space Nova, a nonprofit that supports local LGBTQ youth in Nova. My name is Morgan Atkinson and I use she, her pronouns. Sofia?
My name is Sofia Sosa and I use she, her pronouns.
And my name is Sarah Fontaine and I also use she, her pronouns.
And I'm Julie Alexandrin, she, her pronouns.
So today we will be exploring the different spectrums, sexuality, gender, and romantic, and how they impact consent and relationships. We will be doing this by going over the LGBTQIA+ acronym, the human umbrella, and the gender bear. We will also be discussing labeling relationships and finally having some true and false questions. So we are going to move on to the LGBT acronym. So some of you may know this, some of you may not, but the LGBT acronym stands for L, which is a woman who is attracted to other women, often called lesbian. G stands for gay, a man who is exclusively attracted to other men, and it's also an umbrella term for anyone who experiences same-gender attraction. B stands for bisexual, which is a person who is attracted to two or more genders, and this is oftentimes seen as interchangeable with the word pansexual, which describes someone who is attracted to people disregarding gender. And then finally, T stands for transgender, which is a person whose gender does not match the gender that they were assigned at birth. So this is sort of the classic acronym, so to speak, but there are many variations on it because people don't fit under just those four labels. And so a Q is often added to represent those who are queer or questioning. However, it's important to know that queer was once used as a slur. However, it's often used as an umbrella term, mainly by youth, to describe anyone who doesn't feel represented by one specific label. However, it's best to ask before you describe someone else as queer so that you're able to respect their identity. And finally, there are many variations of additional letters onto the LGBTQ acronym, but we simply sum this up with a plus. The most that I know is LGBTQIA+, for intersex and asexual, but there are a lot more that can fall under that acronym. Now we're going to move on to the human umbrella.
So the human umbrella is kind of a diagram used to express sexuality and gender. And it kind of shows how sexuality and gender are completely different things that don't really influence each other. So that means you can be trans and straight, and you're still in the community. And you can also the way you dress or your gender expression doesn't impact your sexuality. So you can dress you can be a guy who dresses femininely and be straight, or a masculine guy and be gay. It's like, and with women too, right? Next. So the gender bear is a good representation of the differences between sex, sexuality, gender expression, and gender identity. Sex refers to genitals, gender expression refers to what clothes you wear and how you express yourself. Gender identity refers to what pronouns and titles a person prefers. And sexual orientation is who you are attracted to romantically or sexually. Next. So gender identity, as I said, has no relation to sexual orientation. And a person's gender, which may or may not correspond with their birth sex, can be cisgender, which means, like, I'm cisgender, for example, and that just means that I identify as the gender I was born as, or the sex I was born as. You're transgender, which is an umbrella term to describe someone who does not feel that their birth sex refers or matches their gender. And you can be male to female, female to male, or, you know, some genderqueer in between thing. As I was saying, genderqueer is a person whose gender identity may change or doesn't fit under one specific label, and non-binary is someone whose gender doesn't fit the gender binary, which is female and male. So gender expression is how you express your gender to the world. It's basically just what clothes you wear, how you cut your hair, or if you wear makeup or not. Some people do change it based on where they are, or who they're with, but both gender expression and gender identity are determined by the person, by the individual. That means you can be non-binary and have a more feminine or masculine style. The way you cut your hair or which clothes you wear have no effect on your gender identity. And you can decide which pronouns you want and how you want to dress.
Okay, so what is sexual orientation? Put simply, a person's sexual orientation is their sexual identity in relation to their gender and the gender to which they are attracted to. Essentially, it's just which gender you like romantically or sexually. For example, someone who is heterosexual would experience opposite gender attraction. Someone who is homosexual would experience same gender attraction. Someone who is bisexual would experience both or all gender attraction. Someone who is pansexual would experience all gender attraction. And someone who is asexual would experience no sexual attraction. There are many more identities out there that are constantly being recognized as well, but these are kind of just what we have time for, I guess. And this can be romantic or sexual attraction, as some people, such as asexuals, do not feel sexual attraction towards anyone, so they would experience exclusively romantic attraction. Next. So some consent basics before we dive right into it. Consent means to respect people's identities and boundaries. So consent begins at the beginning of a relationship, and it's not just for sexual encounters, which is a common misconception. Consent begins in the early stages of a relationship as soon as it starts, with hand-holding, kissing, things like that. So it must be continual consent even for the same thing. So if your partner consents to something once, they have to consent to it every time you want to do it, not just that one time. And, you know, communication is the most important part of a relationship and for consent. Yeah, next. So relationships and how do you define a relationship? So society puts a lot of pressure on us to label relationships, both in the LGBTQ community and otherwise, but specifically to the community, there are many other influences that can impact relationships, one being familial influence. So a couple's relationship with either family can be wildly different or provide a major obstacle in LGBTQ+ relationships, whether it's a family who fully accepts the relationship, or maybe a family who pressures the couple to end the relationship, or a partner not being out to their family. Another thing that can influence relationships are unsafe or limiting environments. Feeling unsafe in your home life during youth can be stifling for budding members of the LGBTQ community, and knowing that one's family will be unsupportive can lead individuals to refrain from exploring their sexuality and just be, you know, a bit emotionally stunted during their youth, and that can be a hard thing to go through. Next. Other things that can impact our relationships is having a smaller dating pool. Both in rural, urban, or suburban areas, this can happen anywhere. Having a smaller dating pool can pressure youth into relationships, youth or anyone into relationships really, as the fear of not finding a partner can be overwhelming, or you can be afraid that you'll never find anyone else to date, that kind of thing. Another thing is societal labeling. For example, gal pals, if you've heard the term, can be frustrating as it shows a passive lack of acceptance. Using that term and some other terms can be like dismissive of the relationship and can come off as just a lack of acceptance. And conversely, assumptions about the relationships between LGBTQ friends or even heterosexual friends can put strain on platonic relationships. Another issue that comes up within LGBTQ relationships is just defining and labeling a relationship. For example, labeling a relationship as lesbian or straight. For example, if a lesbian woman and a bisexual woman were dating, would that be defined as a lesbian relationship? Or if a woman and a gender nonconforming person were in a relationship, how would that be labeled? So that's something that can come up within the relationship and when you're talking about the relationship to others and things like that.
So here's the start of the true or false. We're going to give you a second after we ask each question for you guys to kind of think about what you guys think the answer is. And if this is like you guys just, you know, keep track, I guess. So the first true or false section is labeling relationships. So true or false, if you are in a same gender relationship, then you are gay. And if you are in an opposite gender relationship, you are straight. Oh my gosh, everyone who's not participating. Whoa, we have so many answers. It looks like the answers are split 50-50. And the real answer is false. The gender of your partner does not define your sexual orientation. You do. Next, true or false? Being intimate with someone of the same gender does not count as cheating if you're heterosexual. So, oh my gosh, so many. Okay, the right answer is false again. If you're in a monogamous relationship, then no matter the gender of the person, it's cheating.
Okay, next, true or false? If someone is asexual and has a partner, they are in a real relationship. Cool, insert Jeopardy music here. Let's see. It is true. The legitimacy of a relationship is not based on sex, but defined by the people involved. True or false? If I am not in a committed relationship, then I do not have to tell my other partners about other people I am intimate with. Wow, what a split vote. Let's see the answer. This is false. So you cannot have full consent in a relationship if you do not have all the information about who your partners are with, whether it be for safety reasons or anything else.
So now we're going to move on to true or false sex in the LGBTQ+ community. And our first question is true or false, lesbian, gay, and bisexual people are not at a higher risk to experience sexual violence with their partner. Look at all these answers pouring in. I don't know, it's a pretty split vote. So the answer is false. So this data is from a 2010 study by the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey based on sexual orientation done by the CDC. So here we can see that both bisexual men and women experienced higher rates of intimate partner violence defined as rape, physical violence, or stalking. And lesbian women had a rate of 26%, whereas heterosexual women had a rate of 29%, and then gay men reported at 43.8%, and heterosexual men reported at 35%. So why do you guys think the rate is higher for bisexual people? Some of the risk factors for why these numbers are higher than heterosexual people could be a lack of community acceptance of biphobia and other pressures in LGBTQ+ relationships that can lead to violence by a partner. It's also interesting that the reported rates for men overall are higher than women, since it's usually the opposite. Why do you guys think this is? So this can be due to issues such as a fear of reporting or a fear of being outed if someone is experimenting with their first same-sex relationship, or just a general lack of acceptance by the community or by someone's relatives and people they have relationships with. All right, next question. True or false? LGBTQ+ people do not always practice safe sex. Look at how many people are answering. So this is true. Regarding safer sex negotiation, 32% of respondents to a survey done by the National Sexual Violence Resource Center said that they were not using protection with their partner specifically to avoid problems. This can be an issue because if you're not having an open and safe conversation about consent and what your expectations are, then you can't really give full consent. So these two links to the Trevor Project and Planned Parenthood are resources for sexual health and practicing safe sex. So some issues to consider here are, where do you go on information for safe sex as an LGBTQ+ person? It's not typically taught in schools, and if your family's not accepting, how are you supposed to gain the skills to have a healthy and open conversation about safe sex? All right, next question. So this slide is all about aspects of being transgender in a relationship. So our first question is, true or false, transgender people experience a high rate of sexual assault? I don't know, guys, do you think it's true or false? Well, I have the answer, and the answer is that it is true. So according to the 2015 United States Transgender Survey, they found that 47% of transgender people are sexually assaulted at some point in their lifetime. So why do you guys think that number is so high? There are, of course, several risk factors that lead to this high percentage. Often a transgender person can present as gender non-specific, and so when they are intimate with a partner, the partner may be surprised by the genitalia because they may not be expecting that genitalia, and that can lead to surprise and anger, and unfortunately that can lead to an increased risk for violence, abuse, and blackmail. Also, transgender people face massive lack of acceptance both within the LGBTQ+ community and outside the community, leading to an overall increased risk of violence, unfortunately, due to their gender identity. And then finally, our last true or false question, true or false, being in a relationship with a transgender man makes a woman homosexual. I like Sophia's earlier thing of insert Jeopardy music. All right, so the answer is false. Someone's sexual orientation is not dependent entirely on the genitalia of their partner. We had talked about earlier that someone's sexual identity is defined by that individual, not by the person they are dating, and the same is true here. So, for example, if I were dating a transgender man, just because my partner has a vagina does not make that a lesbian relationship. I would define that as a heterosexual relationship. But some people do choose to define their sexual orientation and relationships based on the desired genitalia of their partner. But overall, it's difficult to label LGBTQ+ relationships, and you should always be respectful of people's identities. So that's the whole presentation. Thank you for sitting through it. We would usually be taking questions at this point, but there's no live audience. So please think about your questions and come later to a Q&A session. Also, Safe Space Nova hosts online youth social gatherings. So if you were a youth age 13 to 18 who's looking for a virtual safe space during this crazy time in pandemic, then please register at the link below. We meet every other Saturday at 7 p.m. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Bye.